your kid needs to go to Boys Town. If he doesn't, he'll probably be a convicted criminal by the age of 10 or 12. I think the struggle was being around kids where like they got everything they wanted whenever they wanted it. I was the kid where other parents would tell their kids, don't hang out with that kid, don't be around that kid. I was always in trouble. I'm kind of told then after that there's many constraints and I won't be able to go to university as a result.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX and this new episode in our series Owning Our Wealth along with Nungu Diamonds. On this series, we speak to South African change makers and innovators. And today, I'm really excited to be joined by Masego Maps Maponyane, business person, innovator, and entrepreneur. Do you spend time at St. John's at all?
Not much, eh? I will be honest, not much.
Yeah.
Only time I'm there is now and again they ask me to come in and do a talk. Or they've asked me a couple times to do like the valedictorian speech.
Awesome.
Or like some business chat. Sometimes it doesn't line up, sometimes it does.
Yeah.
But my proudest one was probably speaking to the grade 7s for their little valedictory. Because when I was in primary school, and you won't know this about me because we only like linked up again in high school at SJC. When I was in primary school, I got suspended like twice before grade 2. I was a naughty kid. And when I was in grade 2, do you remember our pre-primary school teacher, Mrs. Fordry?
I do, yeah.
When I was brought into her office for like the 5th time that year, she looked at my mom dead in the face and said, your kid needs to go to Boys Town. If he doesn't, he'll probably be a convicted criminal by the age of 10 or 12. And my mom was just like, she was obviously irate about that.
Yeah.
And it was just like, how can you say this about my kid?
Man.
And, there were so many adjustments around that. I feel like we restarted this podcast.
I feel like... Are we rolling?
Are we going?
I feel like this is a perfect story for the podcast. Yeah.
There were so many, like, adjustments around that I look back on now, and there were so many cultural challenges, which is why I was the way I was. There was the cultural challenges of being this black kid from Soweto, Protea North.
Absolutely.
And like never been, firstly, around so many white kids, unless we're like on the soccer field because it's playing club soccer. But kids from these, we better not be rolling because that cabinet is going to be just killing the sound.
Like... yeah.
And like it was just part of those challenges. Like I'm this kid from Soweto, and I've come to the school where I'm literally one of 2 black kids in my grade, right?
Sure.
I think you'll remember what those kind of dynamics were.
I do,
back
but
then.
I was 13, whereas like I didn't ever have that when I was like 6 or 7.
Yeah. And I think the struggle was being around like kids where like they got everything they wanted whenever they wanted it, right?
And at St. John's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you're from this background of like, okay, shit, like this is a new world. My parents are hustling as much as they can. Dad's career's doing like well enough to be able to send us to the school, but just enough to send us to the school. Like everything else is just it's a luxury. Right?
Yeah.
Like the absolute necessity is this, and this is where the extent of the funds will go. Like I was still that kid where even with that push and that hustle, I was still waiting for, like my reports each term and everything, because like there was always that shortfall from the fees for things to come together. And anyway, long story short, like I also had this severe stutter. And so I was on top of being different and really standing out like a sore thumb as being different, completely different social dynamics and background. I then am also getting like mocked and made fun of, and people just confused with this kid why he can't speak properly, let alone still trying to learn this language properly as well. I mean, like, where did we learn English? On the soccer fields,
sure,
right?
Sure.
And I mean, otherwise Kokasi, like we were always just who was Tswana, and then whatever odd word we would like learn from watching TV, the movies. I remember back then, what was it? It was like Terminator or like. Do you remember Judge?
Judge.
Wow. You remember the movie Judge?
No, I don't remember Judge.
Oratile, bro.
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna go look at you at all. Anyway, so I was the kid where other parents would tell their kids, don't hang out with that kid, don't be around that kid. I was always in trouble. And I think it was an overcompensation of being like, okay, I can't get that stuff. I don't like have the privilege you guys have. And you all obviously think you're better than I am, but like, I'll show you and push my weight around. And I think I overcompensated by just always looking for some sort of like attention. I think I became this petulant child because I also got frustrated of how no one would listen and would get frustrated with me for not being able to articulate myself and the certain things I wanted to say or that I felt because, I bring up Terminator because I'd say stuff with my stutter and then people would mimic like a robot, like saying it back. Kids can be really
Especially
mean,
St.
right?
John's.
Exactly.
I can just see that, yeah.
100%. And I remember like one of the breakthrough moments for me back then was kind of going back home and really not liking these kids and going back home and saying to my parents, so-and-so has got like the latest Ronaldo boots, he's got this PlayStation, he's got this, got that, R9s, the silver R9s.
R9s.
Hey,
Oh, that's all
they've
the
got
R9s.
all these things. And sure, they're nice, but they're not nice people, so I don't want them. Like if having all these things is like also doesn't make them nice, then I don't want them because all of them are mean, right? And it's like this kind of childlike reasoning, but for me, it helped me not want to always try and be like other people and like conform into that status quo of how you're meant to behave when you have any kind of privilege or good fortune. And so anyway, I ended up I left the school. I was asked to leave semantics.
I did not know this backstory.
Yeah.
Because we, as you say, we met in high school.
Yeah.
So I actually don't have this context
and
the story of your primary school experience.
In terms of school, we met in high school.
Except on the soccer field.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I guess we reunited in high school. But that's why I went to KEPS. That's why.
Okay.
So I went to went to KEPS. Partially that, and then also financial constraints of trying to be able to have my brother and I at St. John's. I mean, it's
today,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean,
shout out to your parents for even being able to send you to St. John's at a time like that.
Absolutely. Like always forever grateful for that. I mean, we both know the kind of advantage that comes with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so just trying to like find that adjustment, and then going to a school like KEPS afterwards, this public school where people from all walks of life now are at. Like, that immediately showed me what reality is.
Yeah.
Like back to the reality I know. The reality that I go back home to on the weekends, with the kids that I've grown up playing with on the streets and or even at our soccer clubs and everything,
Yeah.
And that for me kind of helped me find myself, because I wasn't trying to, I think I was trying to impress those other kids by being this, because I had nothing else to really offer. Like a lot of things stacked against me, including that, speech impediment. And that was a big challenge. And then I tried to approach this new school with the same attitude, and I immediately got put in my place. And like, just like you would in the hood, where it's like, hey, this is not, this is not St. John's or something. I know who you think you are. And then I was like, okay, this feels right. this feels like home. This feels like the place I know. And that helped me really figure out a lot of things about me and help me find myself and like properly just kind of calm down and have like a bit of a epiphany of sorts of like, this is real life. This is who I am. And with that, and having the confidence of being fully that eventually in my journey back to SJC, I think then helped me really come into my own and really enjoy school and love that environment. But I think it's really important. Like I think of it with my future kids, like I'd love for them to be exposed to both, you know, not in this bubble of this private school bubble. Really be exposed to every kind of person you may encounter, everyone's different challenges and everyone's perspectives, and not this mollycoddled, I guess, blanketed perspective of a sheltered reality.
It feels to me like.
So with the point of that, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
just before you go to that.
Go ahead.
So at the point of that, like after going through those motions and wanting to do right by my mom and always remembering this woman who told my mom this, like I always wanted to just make something of myself. And so to have that full circle of being able to, I guess, do things that have been worthy of any kind of recognition or celebration, any kind of way, to go back to my school,
to be invited
back to my pre-primary school,
and honored,
and to speak to these kids in grade 7 who are now walking into the next chapter of their lives, and being recognized as someone who's come through those walls and being revered when I was kind of shamed and suppressed in many ways.
Absolutely,
was actually quite a really important moment for me.
Can imagine.
And it seems small to many. It seems like an insignificant thing, but I think of like life achievements and those kinds of things ring truest to me. Like it kind of makes me emotional now of like, that was tough. That was tough trying to fit in, you know? Spent a lot of kids going back, spent a lot of days going back home thinking about the kids making me feel like I was like not enough, like worthless, don't belong there. And
racial dynamics as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, predominantly those, right?
Sure.
And then having the parents all of a sudden, be so proud of you. And they're like, no, you were the one saying, don't go anywhere near my child. Telling your kids not to hang out with me. Don't be around that kid. Don't be around that black boy. He's always causing problems.
Huh.
I think I definitely lived a bit of a full life in those years.
Absolutely. I mean, to go back, be invited to speak at that place in that space must have been big. We don't speak enough about how those institutions had and have an impact on us back then and today, and what it took to navigate those spaces in that particular era of South African history. Being black in those spaces. Now the student body at St. John's, for example, for the first time, the remove year, the grade 8 year, is over 50% black, broadly defined. Back then,
different story.
Yeah, there were 2, you said, right? I had a similar experience.
And removed a few more by then.
Right, yeah. But still like 90%, I would say.
Exactly, yeah.
I had a similar experience. I've just stepped down from the Council of St. John's. And I had a mixed experience when I was there, especially my grade 8 year. I'm a boarder, those toxic cultures of like, there are all kinds of different things happening.
I enjoy the poetry of a mixed experience. That it's a bit of a double entendre. There.
Hey.
You've always had that talent.
Hey, well, I suppose.
What can you say?
There we go. And like, to then be invited back as a governor of the school.
Yeah.
Again, felt full circle. But just like you, like, I feel like I have done many different things, but it was the hardest professional experience for me because it was hitting me so much emotionally and taking me back so much to my childhood. I felt like the stakes were just so high.
And you realize the importance of your place there and the impact that kind of engagement can have on kids like you and how vital that is. And how you almost want to you want to right a lot of those wrongs that now you're able to look back on and think, I really don't want other kids to go through this the way we did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we have as a cohort, not just in St. John's, but within these schools, actually made quite a significant difference to the places they are now. I was quite surprised and encouraged.
Yeah.
And I had to constantly remind myself that this place is not the same place that I was at. It's the same building, some of the same culture, but a lot is different that I don't understand. And yeah, a lot has changed for the better.
I think I've enjoyed the non-apathetic approach to like Black Oldahanians to actually changing or improving the system.
Yeah.
And like, if there's one thing I'm proud of around that, is how we've all gone back to confront things and want to use our own experiences to just ensure that it's a better institution for everyone, like fully inclusive, better institution.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not under this guise of we are inclusive, but we're still only, speaking of this inclusion to tick boxes.
Yeah.
Or appear to be progressive, but not actually practice progression in itself. And the contribution, as well as we also, have to also appreciate the acceptance from the institution to recognize that and say, absolutely, play your role, step in, tell us how we can be better.
Yeah.
Because not many institutions would listen to that or do listen to that.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing is that as the institution has become more inclusive, it's become even more excellent.
Yeah.
And that's like the most beautiful story. Like
absolutely.
The matric results are the best in the country, and it's a transforming institution, which just puts paid to that whole idea that you have to choose between those things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got off on this. This is your fault, this St. John's tangent. You are a very good footballer, sir. And we shared a football team once upon a time. Fun fact.
Yeah.
Not many people would know. How old were we? Were we about 10 or so?
Yeah, we were about 9, 10.
Yeah, under 10s.
And,
Wits FC.
Yeah.
The Wits Youth Academy.
And we had Coach Dave, and
Shout out to Coach Dave
we were part of that.
He's watching.
We were part of that starting 11, and
Yes.
you beat me to the compliment because I was going to bring this conversation up and say,
Yeah.
if you don't know how good Caesar Mpofu-Walsh was at football or is at football, oh my gosh,
Definitely was.
No, we had fun, and you were dominant up at the front.
Yeah.
we had a lot of time together as a striking force.
We did,
up there.
No.
I spent a lot of time on the right wing.
I recall.
Whipping some balls in for
I
you that you
recall very
always
well.
finished. Caesar's
good
right
times.
foot. Oof,
Hey.
that volley. Anyway,
I try to tell my wife this, and she's like, there's no evidence of this. Like,
I think about your kid being 3 right now, and
Yeah.
very soon, when you're having these chats and you're watching football, I can't wait for you to say, so
yeah, the craziest thing is, so the first club I ever played for was Old Eds, actually.
Yes.
And now it looks like my son is going to go there when he's like 4 or 5. And I was like, how am I so old that I can tell my son, I also used to play there.
Yeah.
Crazy times. But yeah, the football, man, it was a wonderful outlet. Do you still play?
I don't. Do you know what it is? I mean, look, now and again I'll play social football 5-a-side. On the very rare occasion, we'll do these kind of special events where it's 11-a-side. But my problem with that is everyone has this nostalgia of this forgotten or lost dream that they weren't able to achieve.
Yeah.
And so they have this this delusion of talent.
And sometimes the body just refuses.
The body just, even if it was once there, because it's not something that's been honed over and over again, the body refuses, and then they just do silly things where there isn't a correlation between what they're trying to do and what they actually end up doing, which leads to you breaking an ankle or a leg. And it's just like, I could have avoided this, honestly.
Yeah, no, I injured my knee badly and like...
Yeah. You do that a couple times. So for me, it happened 2-3 times playing, 5-a-side, and some guy was coming a 2-footed tackle, and it's like, we're all just trying to have fun, man. We're trying to get some exercise here. We're trying to also feel the love for the game. We're trying to get some great shots in, some great passes in, show some great skill, and then hopefully be able to defend those that do the same thing by just blocking them off. But we're not trying to, you're not even getting paid to do this. You are paying to do this right now. So
Yeah.
why are you trying to hurt everyone else?
Yeah.
So I think for that, I always make sure I play with really close friends where we're not trying to
Yeah.
hurt each other. And unfortunately, like, it's a very high risk for me when I am both I'm both my staff, I'm both my product and my time. And if I don't have me as the product of my business,
Sure.
always, being fit, strong, healthy, able to travel, move around, then that means that's less time to be able to do what I do.
Yeah.
And as a result, a whole lot less money, and it's not worth the risk to income. Yeah.
I mean, your career has been fascinating to watch. How did this career that is quite unique and almost in some ways tailored to you that you've built, how did this start? Was it something you envisaged, or did it grow organically? Because there are entrepreneurial strands, there's an artistic strand, there is a professional self-development strand, you're a manager, there's a media strand. How did it come about? Was it foreseen, or was it an organic unfolding?
It was an organic, fateful unfolding. I had just finished high school, and I just finished my matric finals, and my mom had been. It was a period my mom had been unemployed for a couple of years, and my dad's company had just gotten liquidated after he used to run this promotional gifts company, in corporate branding, branding on pens and everything. I used to see his business card. Like, they did all sorts of things, and it was called Maps Maponyane and Associates,
Okay.
And that's something I'll pick up a little bit later. I think I'm always fond of how my dad picked himself after football in a system where he was a professional footballer when football wasn't professional. I mean, he was working 2-3 other jobs, and
wow, I didn't know that.
It was
so while he was playing, it
was like a Reebok and then Adidas sales rep, and doing a whole bunch of other side things. Because remember, it was a kind of sanctioned footballing era where football was played for out of passion.
Sure.
And it's why I always argue that football was a whole lot better then as well, because you did it because you really loved it. And now it's a different story. But he will joke now and again of like he grew up playing football in both the best time to play football, but unfortunately, the worst time in terms of wanting to be able to earn something from playing football.
Definitely.
I always kind of think of when he tell me that I think his highest paycheck at the peak of his career playing football was around when he's kind of retiring, it was around 4,000 to 6,000 rand. Like 4,000 to 6,000 rand, not 46, 426.
426.
And when he was playing for peak clubs in like the 80s, it was around like 400 rand, 600 rand,
Wow.
And that was a completely different time.
Absolutely.
So
he could easily have played in Europe, and
100%.
right now he would have been earning 40,000 pounds a week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, I think of that, and I think of how I would be in the car many times post his career and hear a lot of his peers call and just say, hey, Max, hey, Hubi, my weights, things are so difficult. Is there any way that you can spot me $100 for the month? This is like footballers who were like the best footballers in the country and who like stars, but because of lack of finances or lack of financial management and not doing anything post their career, not being taken care of the system, because if we go into the bodies that run football in this country, it's an absolute mess.
Definitely.
And there's a lot of neglect of those that have paved the way for it to currently exist and stand. And if you look at other systems around the world, I mean, all those players are really well taken care of by their clubs, and they can really make something of their lives and their careers. And I'm thinking, person that comes to mind right now. In fact, you think of a lot of our players who've gone and played overseas and how they're taken care of purely from being an alumni of those teams. The person that comes to mind is, you see what Lucas has also done with his career.
Absolutely.
And how he's just become the ambassador, like official team ambassador for Leeds United. I mean, he's
like a demigod out in Leeds.
He's an absolute demigod. There's bus stations, buildings, streets named after him.
Yeah.
I heard some crazy stat that there's an era right now where 31% of kids that were born, their names were Lucas. They were named Lucas.
Wow.
And that just tells you, the kind of mark that he left. But I digress. I was, I used to really admire how he made something post his career, made something of himself. And I think of his business card, and they did all these things, and his byline at the end was Maps Maponyane and Associates. We do everything but drugs. And that's the kind of dad. The kind of person my dad was, always kind of making things, quite entertaining in whatever he did. Anyway, so we go through this difficult time, and I'm kind of told then after that there's many constraints and I won't be able to go to university as a result. And it's been difficult sending me to the school that I went to, even if, the times when there was financial support from the school. It's been tough for them to keep up with things. And now with having no income and liquidation and challenges around that, I'm on my own, and hopefully what I've learned is going to be enough after going to that school. And I end up going on this forced gap year, needing to make a plan.
Can we stop right there? Again, I did not know this, which shows how interesting it is when you're watching someone you think you know from afar and the actual story.
Yeah.
But the juxtaposition of leaving St. John's, the most prestigious private school in South Africa, and being told, good luck, there's not enough right now, you're going to have to figure it out. There are people with the one experience and the other, but very few who have both experiences at the same time. And the problem with that is that everyone looking at you is thinking, but you went to St. John's, so you're fine.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, it's like making ends meet, but I've been at St. John's. So that must have been an interesting combination of emotions to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you are hit with that reality from the two people you've put on this pedestal and have taken such good care of you that you feel like things are going to be fine. And then this hits you.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait, this is, now we're done with school. This is reality. These are the kinds of challenges that you face. And I was always like that. They were very honest about financial situations over the years. And I'm always grateful, again, that I was never given whatever I wanted. I'm always grateful that from a young age, my parents would tell me that I can't have something unless I use it with my own money. And they weren't giving me any money. So how would I make that happen?
Yeah.
And so that got me interested. I think that's where my spark for entrepreneurship came in as well, because that made me think, how can I make money? And I remember I, 7 years old, drew up my first contract. And I say contract because, I would see my parents or my dad always speaking about contracts and how those worked. And so I remember writing 3 sentences of the things I would do around the house and getting my parents to sign that they'd pay me as a result 1 rand a week.
Wow.
And I would save that money.
Talk about a big contract, man.
It's a big signing.
Yeah.
And then that would enable me then to start to be a little bit more independent and not always be met with, you can pay for that with your own money if you want those sweets or that, those shoes or whatever it might be. And I remember when immediately I got that first 1 rand, I wanted to go and buy something because, that had a little bit more value then.
Hey, kids don't know these days. 1 rand could get you things at the tuck shop back then.
Exactly. So I would go and do that. My mom was like, no. I bought you a piggy bank. Put your money in here. And then when this gets full and heavy, you can buy yourself something bigger. And I remember saving over weeks and weeks and weeks, and then buying a bicycle, and then being like, oh damn, okay, this could be a way of, managing my money. And how do I continue to do that? And I would buy marbles and then go back to school and sell marbles that I just bought for a little bit of a margin, and then come back and save more money and figure out ways of continuing to kind of repeat that cycle. And so I had my ways of always trying to figure out how I could make things work, and I was quite fortunate to have had to still always work damn hard for anything and be taught the lesson of earning everything.
Yeah.
No matter what, kind of, for lack of a better phrase, the smoke and mirrors of the environment that you're currently exposed to may show you. That is not you. That is not your life. But, these are the kinds of things that you could afford yourself if you work towards being someone that has earned that life. And so similarly to that, I then in this gap year kind of then decide I need to figure out then how I implore all those kinds of lessons and everything, figure out how I can make this work. And I started working at Akajo and, putting in the shifts there. And I thought of the things that I might be interested in and try to figure out ways of entering certain spaces. And
showing your age again with Akajo. By the way.
Yeah.
And this is like a millennials like memory lane.
So there I'm playing my cassette.
And Nelly came on.
And I reached for my CDs from my anyway. So then in February 2009, I get a call from a certain Mr. Norris saying, I won't do his accent because it will be lost on everyone else.
Exactly.
But Mr. Norris, being our school sports teacher, says, listen, I've heard about what's happening at home, and something has come across me here at school, and I thought I'd get in touch with you to see if you'd be interested. But there's a production company that is looking for someone who could who knows a lot about schoolboy rugby, who played schoolboy rugby at a high level, and has a certain level of charisma and could hold their own in front of a television camera, and thought that you might possibly be interested and could be someone as a candidate to go and audition for this. And I was like, gee, great. I would love to. When is the audition? I'm thinking, I need to start getting some time in. It's like, it's tomorrow morning. And I'm like, damn, it's tomorrow morning. But now you're in a situation where, great, like I've been dealt the cards I have, but I've also been able to go to the school that I've been able to go to, living, unfortunately, in a country where I'm immediately at an advantage because of my command of the English language. Let me use this to the best of my ability and give this a shot.
Absolutely.
And I remember spending that night in front of the mirror, just doing these like mock auditions, trying to be both the rugby coach and myself, doing this back and forth, mock interview as if this is what they're going to ask me. And just to prepare myself for the audition, and thought of different ways of making it even more interesting, exciting, and whatever they might throw at me. And I did the audition and I got the job. And my first job on television was as a result of that phone call and this audition going well. And I hosted this rugby show on SuperSport called Classic Clashes. And that's kind of like, that's where the foray into media started. And from that came, just really one thing kept leading to the other. And I was also a PA for the director for SA Fashion Week. And that came from being interested in the world of fashion and design and constantly knocking on her door. I irritated her so much. She kept turning me down.
How did you, because it's so fascinating. I'm very privileged to be able to speak to a lot of people who have, reached tremendous success like you have. And it's so, like, I wouldn't have thought this, but there's always a story of how this person managed to create a job for themselves or a role for themselves with someone they respected, and how pivotal that is to their journey.
Yeah. Well, I went to the office after not getting a response to the email I'd sent, probably because of our terrible email accounts back then as well.
Yeah. Hotmail.
Yeah, Hotmail. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it didn't help that I thought it was clever having an email address that was spam_map. Because spam was map spelled backwards.
That'll get you.
And I was like, okay, that's smart. But
that'll get you the job,
not.
Man. Like,
so naturally, people always thought it was exactly that, spam. Anyway, so
worst email ever.
So I'd kind of sit in the waiting room, often saying, I'm here to see this lady. I just want to do anything. I want to learn about this world. And I've always wanted to go to Fashion Week as well and see how the designers work and I want to be your runner. I want to get you your coffee. I want to do whatever you need. I just want to learn. And, she'd tell me that she didn't even hire men for the job. And I was just like, no, I promise you, I won't let you down. And I think my persistence eventually got to her and made her think, okay, maybe this person, would be good. And that's how I started as her PA. And so
Are you able to share?
Lucilla Boyson, yeah.
Right.
Lucilla
this is the
Boyson.
SA Fashion Week founder.
Yeah. SA Fashion Week founder. Right. She's been running SA Fashion Week now for 29 years.
Wow.
So almost 30 years. And through being exposed in that world, because now I'm able to express myself while I'm doing this job and I'm running around with her. People are always like, who's this kid? Who's this kid running around? And I think I might have seen him on the show. And then I'm asking, for jobs on the side with those people. Anyway, all these different ways of hustling kind of culminated into one thing to next. That kind of led to down the line to things like GQ, to Cosmo, and to more work in media, to ads, to modeling stuff. And this just ended up being this avalanche while at the same time studying at Wits.
Yeah.
And so I'm like working all these different jobs, studying, but the only reason that was happening was that I was working all those jobs to be able to pay for studies, and I sometimes think how different my career would have been if I was not in that situation.
Yeah.
Because that was out of necessity once again. It's like, I need to make something. There's no plan B. I need to make something of myself and take every opportunity that is thrown at me.
Yeah.
And just absolutely say, yes, I can do it, even though I have absolutely no idea what I'm going into. And then just learn on the job and prove myself.
You know what stands out just on these parts of the journey is, I think of you as someone who, in all of our peers, attained success really early. But I'm now realizing that you also had to learn lessons really early, hard lessons that people usually learn a lot later in their lives. Like your primary school, like the emotional bandwidth that you had to develop to deal with all of that is like maybe people learn in high school or even varsity. The kind of work experience stuff is stuff people learn after they've graduated.
Yeah.
So your early success is partly attributed to the early learnings that you had to do earlier than most other people. Absolutely.
And I think that's why I'm always grateful for those experiences. And I think especially for the vast perspectives that gives you from being on kind of all sides of it and having an outlook, well, actually more of an in-look into all those sides of it. And I think that's really just kind of what ends up molding you and what helps you. It ends up being an advantage in a way of it's a bit of a sweeping term to use, but I think in people mastery, because then you can put yourself in the minds, into the lives, into the kind of feet of all these people, into the shoes of all these people, I beg your pardon, and really understand all those perspectives from an informed point of view.
Absolutely. But you also come from many perspectives. So
Yes, exactly.
St. John's.
Yeah.
So you're able to see those two different worlds that a lot of people just don't have access to, or
100%.
one or the other.
Absolutely. And then also I think of that post-matric exam situation. I didn't go into kind of the detail of then, the sheriff coming around to the house and taking away things. And then just being like, this is real, And then having, your parents say, this is where we're at, and then thinking of the challenge that must be, or toll that must take on them to tell their child that like there's nothing else that they can do from here. But you know, they've done their best. And then knowing, and it kind of like being this coming of age in a way of just like, cool, like I don't understand this right now, but I understand that I need to do something about it. Like I'm now a man, and I can no longer act like a child or as a dependent, and really just step into my own and start being very intentional about the path I want to walk on myself. And I think without those experiences, it changes a lot, you know, and I'm, in a way, you don't have to want, like, I think of my children in the future, I don't want to put them through that, but like the kind of irony of the subsequent privilege that comes with experiencing that kind of challenge that needs to be overcome is just like it's a test in the end that once you get through, you feel like you can kind of take just about anything on if you just really put your mind to it and make it happen. But then also remembering that in a way it's still from an advantageous point of view too.
Sure.
Yeah.
What was the breakthrough for you in going from being able to convert fame, notoriety, being well known into an actual career where you were able to convert that into financial sustainability? Because there are many famous, well-known people who get great media gigs for a window, but aren't able to convert that, even at the time, into a proper financial vehicle, but also have a longer term plan. Was there a breakthrough for you where you started figuring out how you could make that conversion?
I think it was always an initial intention of not wanting to be this kind of fly-by-night and wanting to establish the end kind of goal of always accomplishing a certain level of longevity through everything. And that so that then feeds into the decisions that you make. How will they take away from that longevity? And then kind of then establishing exactly who you are and how that distinguishes you from everyone else and being true to that. So I remember I would go for auditions, be it for acting or commercials or these other gigs when I was in varsity. And I'd see some of the greatest South African actors and actresses there, and I would kind of be very confused. I'm like, I'm just getting started in my career. Why are you in this line with me? And then seeing it more and more, and also seeing like the challenges they were having, and then that triggering my mind around the conversations I'd hear in the car that my dad would be having with his former teammates, and then thinking about, I never want to be in that situation, and I never want to be years down the line in my career and still sitting in the same line as someone who's just starting their career too. Obviously, this is a industry that has great potential earnings in many different ways, but all those ways are the ways you don't see, which are behind the camera, right? So how do I then try and shift that dynamic from being the person who's constantly asking for the job, and hoping that their next gig is dependent on someone else, you know, deciding to cast you for this role or whatever it might be, and more me being in charge of my own destiny in that regard. So creating the work. How do I get into a position where I'm creating the work, building a a sense of authority around it because of work that has come before it? And how do I always do things that work towards building this model that people can look on and kind of say, damn, how's he doing that? And for me, a lot of the time that came from making, intentional decisions and taking risks that would put me in that position of power. So when I say power, I mean as in power over myself and my own destiny. And it was always simple things like I would look at brands and how they would have certain, marketing models and what they wanted to do and what they wanted to produce and who they were targeting and the people they were using. And I would think of the brands I'd really want to work with. And I would come up with a whole pitch and a plan and then say to them, like, this is what they're missing. This is what they need to do. This is where they need to focus on. This is the target market that will work best for them. And here's a few different ideas you guys could execute. And I need to be the guy that does it with you.
So insightful, bro, because like just the way you frame the pitch already, it might seem intuitive to you, but like I would think of a pitch as like, hey, this is who I am. This is my platform. This is how big it is. Yeah. Let's partner. But by framing it as this is the gap that you have and this is how I
can meet that gap.
Now I see why you got so many damn brand deals. Continue to.
I mean, it started like that. And now it's at a position where I think other brands are like,
then they start coming to you. Right?
Exactly. Because they're like, there's got to be something here. Then for me, it's like, how do I continue to make sure that I under-promise and over-deliver? Or over-promise and then over-deliver on that promise. And continue to make it worthwhile for those brands. Yeah. But initially, it was exactly that. Like, initially, there was the, damn, you everywhere. You're doing this. Like, what are you not? And that was out of necessity. I'm like, if I'm going to be doing what I want to do, I need to be everywhere. I need to be meeting as many people as possible. I need to get these kind of connections and conversations going with them where they are comfortable with me, where then I'm in a position to say, hey, we were here together. We had this conversation. You remarked on my work, but you were telling me about your business. And I think actually this is what you need to look at. And have you ever thought of doing this? And it would either work out into, would you like to be a part of the project and kind of like consult on it? Or how do you see yourself meeting this? I'm like, I'd love to be in both positions. So now you're being able to see both perspectives and be able to cut from both sides of the pie, and not just be limited to this and not be boxed in the way of this person is just a talent or an artist or whatever, and they don't think for themselves. They just do what we tell them to do. Yeah. But really actually taking that position of this is the value I add. Because the reason, I think of how you spoke about taking the approach of, meeting that gap. For me was always, whatever I do, I always want to try to work backwards. So the idea for me is the brand or the agency will always want to think of what their benefit is or what the aim for them is. Yeah. So as soon as you can meet them from that point of view, then it's perfectly fine. Yeah. Then everything else just fits in, because then they're like, oh, and you've got the numbers, and you've got the presence, and you've got the ability, and then everything that you do with every single brand, every single time, is then execute, be reliable, make sure that you simple things like showing up on time, be the person that they can trust to get things done, even if they're looking elsewhere and they're not sure about something. And they're like, oh, we've used this person a few too many times. They're like, hey, but we don't want it to, we don't want to take the risk of not, and then it doesn't, go off the way we want it to. And then they're just happy each time. And then it's up to me, to ensure that I never take that for granted and I deliver every single time in whatever I'm proud of. I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I'm taking notes, because I'm also at a point with this platform where, as we continue to do partnerships, now I'm engaging a lot more with brands. But finding a way to make a case that there's a platform is not enough. It's also about, how does the platform help? How do you keep the integrity? How did you juggle multiple brands? Because that's also, I mean, you were, and in many ways are still in a lot of different places.
So firstly, I just want to commend you on the integrity to begin with. The most important part is doing the groundwork.
Yeah,
to get to the point where I'm speaking about pitching brands to this and that.
Yeah, sure.
And then going to as many of these different events and all that as much as possible. It's kind of doing that groundwork initially to show how serious you are about what you do, your level of hunger, but also just, what you have to offer and why you're good at what you do.
Yeah, yeah.
And the amount of groundwork and foundation that you've built with your brand is impeccable.
Sure.
And I have to commend you for that and how that speaks volumes, because even coming up to this interview, I am signing my name in at the security guard downstairs. There's two gentlemen there. There's a security guard. I'm guessing the other's your bodyguard, because it's quite a burly looking man. And the security guard is saying, way up. And I'm just like, go the SMXW interview. SMWX, sorry.
I knew I should have changed the name. This name, man.
SMWX.
I'm like, why did I come up with this 4-letter? Anyway, it is what it is.
I'm sure you've heard all the variations,
brother.
Especially from another generation above us.
Oh, yeah, no, there you are.
Your X Games podcast. And I signed my name, and this gentleman's telling me, and then just sign here, sir. And then I sign. And he says, it is. And I say, no, I don't. Can you direct me? I just know it's on second floor. And then he says, yeah, second floor. And then you just, go the way that I went. And he says, hey, yeah, no, we commend people like you. You are obviously going up there to fix the country. Thank you. And I'm like, damn.
Wow.
That's a kind of
it's amazing
reverberation of the kind of work that you probably take for granted behind the mic that you do, that people get to see in spaces that you wouldn't imagine would impact them equally.
Sure.
And I also know you to be the person that wouldn't also be that kind of naive to imagine that it wouldn't impact them equally, but just the level of impact that you have on those lives is evident. So, if you're doing the work from that level in a space that kind of appeals in a way to people who have a great deal of access to be able to view it and enjoy it and consume it, that already is a solid standing that, again, speaks before you enter the room and echoes in spaces that you aren't involved in, that makes it a whole lot easier to be able to, walk in any direction with any brand that you imagine lines up authentically with you. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I realized that was just
No, it's all good, man.
I don't know if I even got onto the question because I stopped to then commend you on that. If you remember what the question was, that moment really hit me. And
it's the most gratifying thing about the platform right now is exactly that. Like, people who I would not necessarily expect, or who people don't expect to care about the platform. Ordinary, everyday, working South Africans, like on the ground, watch the show and comment, and security guards, petrol attendants will come up to me and be like, no, that interview where you said, and I'm like, that is the most, like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because also, like, society's given us this misconception, the fact that, like, someone who is perceived to be in this working class category is someone who's not interested in the well-being of their society and their country, and interested in matters of politics and nation building, and actually have an informed stance.
Yeah.
And I think that's the power of this is the information that you're giving.
Definitely.
And you're sharing and kind of fighting that misinformation as well as that disinformation.
Yeah.
And the distinction there is something that people also don't understand. They throw that misinformation word around where, misinformation can be something that's forgiven because you were ill-informed yourself.
Sure.
And so you pass on these news that weren't quite fact-checked. But the amount of disinformation where it's an intention to do so is what people find themselves eating a lot from the Kool-Aid of, and finding themselves in a situation where they truly believe something that is just so wrong.
Yeah. No, it's a scary time for that as well, because, I mean, back in our day, you couldn't just like get on SABC and broadcast to like hundreds of thousands of people, from your own studio or whatever. And now you do have that power, but then it's like, whoa. I also don't have the resources, but now the audience is that big. And there's a lot of nonsense out there, but there are also some gems out there in the new digital media landscape that we need to nurture. But back to you, sir. What has been a major challenge in your career so far that you've learned lessons from?
Apart from previously mentioned.
Yeah.
I'd say a major challenge has probably been adapting to the fear of kind of like starting anything firstly, and knowing that there's a great chance of failure, and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And then having, everyone around you, including some of your closest and family, just asking you why you're doing that. And not even them not even backing you or believing you, and then just being like, yo, if you believe in yourself, then great, good luck with that. But I don't
believe
see
in
how
your
this
belief.
works. Exactly, I believe in your belief. I think it's been quite challenging to kind of always feel like you've got what it takes, and that you're able to take on a lot of the negativity or noise that comes from, your efforts, and then not internalizing that, and then continuing to get up and keep going, and knowing that you have what it takes, knowing that you're enough, knowing that you're there for a reason, and knowing that you have a great deal to offer, just because someone has a different perspective, just because, someone unfortunately may be misinformed and don't know what your life is actually like, or has been like, or what the journey has been like.
Some are even disinformed.
Some, exactly. There's no need to take whatever they say personally if you know your own truth, right? There's obviously lots that has come from the assumption that because you are so and so's child that you have ended up here in your career, when there couldn't be a further disassociation, an intentional one, so that I'm able to focus on my career, which also came from the prescripted, set on journey of the prodigal son that's going to follow in footsteps of this person on the football field. And then, unfortunately, that light and that desire for that being snuffed from me because of how unpleasant that environment was created in order to constantly be like this person. And then having those conversations with myself of kind of thinking, is this actually my dream, or am I just trying to fulfill other people's dream because of what my father's done for his life, and how incredibly he did in following his dream. And then altogether, firstly, reconfiguring and navigating what your dreams might be, and then wanting to take the lessons of how he just did everything that he could, no matter what, and put himself into his dream 100%, and showing the work that took in those times, and taking those same lessons and doing the same for my own journey. I think for me that's been fundamental, to always believe and remember, and never be in doubt about, who and where and how I've become who I am and where I am, and actually acknowledging and stopping to acknowledge the work that has been putting in that regard. I think it's it can hit you it can hit you very personally. It can make you have a lot of doubts, and you feel that kind of, I don't want to just throw it around because it seems to be a bit of a buzzword, but like that imposter syndrome does set in, that those days where you just feel like you're just not, you might not be up for it, where you then kind of think of whether you're a fraud, but then you remember the work that you've put in, and you remember your journey, you remember just how much you know and how unique you are in that space, and how there is no other person that has walked that same journey, and so you fulfill already such a unique place that distinguishes you from anyone else. And then you look at how you've ensured that you're always true to yourself in all of that, and never wanting to be like anyone else. That immediately already puts you in your own category where everyone else is trying to be like other people, and so far deep into an extent where they've forgotten who they are when the time comes, that then ends their own careers. It's been important for me to then kind of stick to the course when no one else has understood why, why you've made that decision. But kind of continually remembering what your vision is, what your why is, or what my vision is, what my why is, and then just continuing to believe that you've got what it takes to keep walking that journey of what you want for yourself. And then remembering that that's what matters at the end of the day. I mean, one of the most liberating things for myself that I always speak about when I have the chance is what fundamentally changed for me early in my career. And I think that has kept me on a kind of positive trajectory, is letting go of worrying about other perceptions, and letting go of the desire for the deep approval of strangers. Not saying that obviously, in some way we always want a little bit of an approval,
but
absolutely,
not being,
but not being defined by that, or not being motivated by that either.
I think fame is one of the hardest tests life can throw at you, especially fame at a young age. I mean, we both went to school with Kekana as well, and that was something that I witnessed as well. And I thought of you in a similar category, in that when we were really young, you were the two that were like, everywhere. And I wonder how have you set up mechanisms to deal with, number one, the good sides of fame and the bad sides of fame, because they both create and set up a distorted picture of reality that you have to confront and deal with, and some people are able to deal with the negative criticism, but they let the positive stuff lead them astray, and vice versa. And it's something I'm grappling with, and continue to grapple with. But how do you grapple with it?
I mean, I don't want to be reductive about it, but firstly, one of the things is what I was saying there, of letting go of needing to seek approval and needing to impress anyone else.
Yeah. How did you do that?
How did I do that? I think I was lucky that my parents have always put me in my place, and my dad was never quite that person. Unfortunately, being a footballer does come with wanting to keep with the Joneses, and maybe pushing yourself out of your financial means in certain ways and certain purchases, because it's part of the lifestyle, and you need to make sure that you keep that appearance up. And I think it's probably from taking those kinds of things and being like, okay, that put us in a tight spot here, that made things challenging here, and that's why I ended up needing to do what I'm doing now in the first place. And so how do I take all those lessons, both the positives and the negatives, and clearly see what works and what doesn't? I again go back to those conversations in the car of, these great legends being let down and them not taking care of themselves as well with what they had, and then thinking of that's what making the wrong decision or decisions and trying to impress other people can also lead you to. I think it's a lot of it is that perpetual fear of not not wanting to be broke, man. Like, I think it's such a scary thing to be in that position. I think I've also had like those intentional missions in my life where I remember my grandfather being on his deathbed telling me about how his father, so my great-grandfather, had done what he could to be able to have a better life for him, and then how he did what he could for my dad, and then what my dad did for us, and how he said to me, like, you know, I know things are difficult right now, but promise me that you'll end up going to school. You'll make something of yourself. Stay in those books, and then make sure that you create a better life for your children. And don't lose focus. Don't be distracted, and you'll be fine. You know. And I think it's that feeling over anything else of the realization of the gravity of the amount of people that depend on you to ensure that you succeed, to ensure that you stay afloat at all times. And their well-being, because of your love for them, is paramount as well. And wanting to be in a position where I'm the best possible parent I can be to my kids and offer them anything that will improve their lives and make it a better life than my own. And when you realize like the gravity of the fact that it's all fun and games to, you know, try and always be this person who's out there and flashy and trying to show everyone what you've got and wanting to impress everyone else. But the fact that like all those people are only around when that's happening, and that when things come crashing down, that happens in a solitary manner, and that you're the one who has to live with that, and that's when they all disappear.
Yeah.
When you remember that you'll be the only one left when your downfall, or if your downfall ever had to come, I think that's more than enough motivation for me. And I think it's important that I keep. Luckily, I'm a curious person who feels like they have so much potential to do so much because I'm so interested in so many things, and I'm just excited to live as much as I possibly can. And I'm just lucky that a lot of that living and excitement for what I do has led to, you know, successful forms of income. You know, I recognize our privilege as well. You know, the other day.
Now you've got some bags, bro.
The other day,
you've got some serious bags.
The other day, I was asked like what my definition of success is, and I couldn't help but think of, you know, I go back to the conversation with my grandfather and the various challenges that, you know, parents might have had to have gotten where they did.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but think of our history as well, and how that, for me, success to me ends up being the ability to decide whether I'm going to walk, take a bicycle, take a taxi, a cab, or drive. Decide what I want to eat. Decide where I'd like to move to. Like, I've got that ability, that freedom of movement. Decide if I'm going to sleep outside, or I'm going to camp, or if I'm going to be in some shelter in a house. And have the ability and freedom to fly somewhere, because I'm just able to do that now. I'm able to get on a plane because we've been put in these positions from sacrifices that we made for us to have tangible careers that can lead towards some sort of generational wealth down the line. And if you think about how none of that was possible in very recent history, just the freedom of movement alone in itself, and how many people are lacking 90% of the things I just mentioned as well, and then realizing again just that level of privilege that you're in, also how much work you've put into it, but also how that needed to be activated by the people that have, you know, kind of paved that way for you. And never taking that for granted, and then wanting to do the same. I mean, that's what drives me, wanting to do the same as well for as many people as possible. I mean, I'm lucky to work in numerous organizations right now, and the focus for me a lot of the time is youth and education, because I grew up where I grew up, and I think of the kids I was with and how a lot of them, their lives took a completely different direction. They could have been like a lot smarter, a lot more talented. They could be sitting on, great cures and ideas and revolutions in those minds that have unfortunately just left them to, packing papers or whatever it might be. And that was all due to a certain lottery of my life and exposure to education, and that came with opportunity. And I think that we need to kind of keep moving towards a society that makes that a standard, a guarantee, and not a luck of the draw or lottery whether someone's life can be lived with dignity. Once you're given those opportunities, the rest is up to you, right? Like you make those decisions.
But creating that base of opportunity.
It should never have to just be a case of the haves and have-nots.
Yeah.
And that, I think, there's something that we can all work towards being able to shift and improve in the smallest of ways. And I think with the access, with the possible influence, with the network, I'm always trying to push as much as possible, because I count my lucky stars all the time that it could be a different story. And then I think of how we live our names, and my name, Maseho, means good luck, good fortune, and blessings. And a lot of that has been lived through that definition.
Well, Maseho, I know you're a busy man. You probably have a flight to catch. But we appreciate the time that you've given us on this platform. Appreciate the work. Part of what we're trying to do here is tell people stories, but also elevate people who deserve their flowers while they can get them. So keep doing what you're doing, sir. And I was a better soccer player than you, but hey. It's okay. And just good luck. Good luck with the future. And it's wonderful to watch your journey unfold.
Thank you very much.
See you on the five-a-side pitch one day.
I'll see you there.
No two-footed tackles.
No, none of that. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Help us reach 250,000 subscribers, and make sure to keep it locked on SMWX. Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.